Good afternoon, and welcome to the Austin Young Chamber Civics 201, Issues and Policy in Central Texas. My name is Alicia Palacios Woods, and I'm the President and CEO of the Austin Young Chamber. We are glad that you have joined us today as we learn more about the key issues we are facing in our region, how policy affects equity, and what we can do now to inform policy solutions that will bring prosperity for all. Thank you to our Civics 201 sponsors, Ascension Seton and the Downtown Austin Alliance. And of course, thank you to our Economic Development Committee members for their dedication and intentionality in planning this forum during an important time for civic engagement in our city and in our country. At the Austin Young Chamber, we are focused on developing young professionals to be dynamic leaders in both business and community roles. We are dedicated to providing opportunities for you to connect and engage around topics that are relevant, meaningful, and transformative. We run many programs throughout the year that promote business and talent development, entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and community growth. Since the pandemic started in March, the Austin Young Chamber has continued to offer programming virtually, over 30 programs in the past 6 months. We encourage you to hop on our website at austinyc.org to learn more about becoming a member and engaging with us throughout the year. As you can see, we are in an exciting new virtual platform. After the keynote, you will be able to choose your breakout session and head there simply by clicking the buttons found at the bottom of your screen. When we're not in presentation mode, you'll see them. The left button for the affordability session and the right button for the education session. Then tomorrow you will head straight to breakout sessions and we'll be back here together for our closing idea exchange and open networking mixer. Also at the bottom of your screen, you will see a button for a resource list. We encourage you to visit that page today and tomorrow to see the civic engagement and learning resources our committee has put together for you, as well as add any of your own as we crowdsource our favorite ways to stay informed and up to date to share with the group. This resources list will live on past Civics 201, so always feel free to come back to it on our website. As we move through our speakers and sessions, the Young Chamber staff and committee members are here to guide you and support you in navigating this virtual conference space. So feel free to email us with any issues you may be having. We may have time at the end of today's keynote for Q&A. If you have a question during the presentation, please add it to the Q&A tool right here in Remo. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, AJ Bingham. AJ is the founder and CEO of the Bingham Group. He has a decade of experience lobbying for clients at the municipal and state levels in Texas. His practice includes government affairs, public affairs, and procurement. Prior to launching his firm, AJ served as Director of Government Affairs for the Real Estate Council of Austin. He began his lobbying career at one of Texas's top firms and has worked at a leading Texas government procurement firm as a consultant for medium to global Fortune 500 companies. When not serving clients, AJ teaches an MBA-level government relations course at Rice University's Jesse H. Jones Graduate School of Business. AJ holds a BA from Wake Forest University and a JD from Washburn University School of Law. Born into a military family and raised right here in Austin, he is a graduate of Austin's nationally ranked public high school, the LBJ Science Academy, now Liberal Arts and Science Academy. I am proud to say that AJ is also a past board member of the Austin Young Chamber and currently serves on several boards in our community. Thank you for joining us today, AJ. I will now virtually pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Alicia, and thanks, Mel, and to the members of the committee and the AYC board for having me here today. I joined AYC as a board member in 2011, and I've been continually impressed with the programs, the quality of the programs y'all put on since then, and I'm glad to be here today. Affordability, education, homelessness, and transportation are some of the most pressing issues our city faces, and ones that, as we continue to grow, and we will, can either make us or break us. And these are going to be based on the policies that our elected officials craft. You're going to learn a lot today and tomorrow from the assembled speakers, some of whom I know personally and I've worked with professionally. And I hope you're inspired to do something with the knowledge you receive. As Alicia mentioned, I'm a lobbyist, which means professionally, my life revolves around policy pretty much 24/7. What's being discussed, who's discussing it, who likes it, who hates it, all of it. Regarding equity, though, it's not something I've actively think about. And typically, especially over the past year, it's mainly been at times of tragedy, as we've all witnessed on social media and on the news. However, though, equity, or particularly institutional equity, permeates every aspect of my life. This next slide. This includes, as Alicia said, attending one of Austin's best public high schools, going to college, going to law school, even having the ability to start my own company. It's allowed me to live where I want to live, eat where I want to eat, pursue my pursue my community and professional ambitions to their fullest. It's not a perfect system we're in, a perfect system we're in, but it's progress. And a myriad of factors have brought me here today. A myriad of factors have brought me before y'all here today. And the top of that list would be luck. I've been lucky to not have been caught up in any of the ways I know, and the Black community particularly knows, that boys, teens, and men can be impacted by our unequal systems in our country, which include pretty much being anywhere with my skin tone, even my own home. All this to say, I'm here before you today as a direct result of the countless battles for equity under the law and in our nation's social fabric, ones that continue to this day and will likely continue into the future. Moving into our discussion, I've broken it up into 3 parts, which individually merit deeper dialogue, and I've done my best to encapsulate key takeaways in each. So moving to part 1, how policy affects equity. I want to start with just defining, I think equity especially gets tossed around a lot. I want to start with defining equity in policy. Equity is defined by Oxford Dictionary as the quality of being fair and impartial. Policy is defined as a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by a government, party, business, or individual. And what I've experienced in my profession, and I think in preparing for this talk and just studying history, equity and policy in our country is a constant churn, it's a constant push and pull of pushing values or asserting values of fairness, while social fabric or social mores and laws pull against it. And I coalesced, I think, just a definition of both of them together. The policies are the laws, as well as the formal and informal public standards which seek to uphold or counter our nation's values, and in this case, equity. I have a few examples of this push and pull. So we have from the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 1776. We also know the history of our country with slavery, a bill of sale from 1855. And the push and pull happens in several ways. We have through wars, it could be activism, but this is probably war is probably the most extreme form of activism of asserting a viewpoint. And laws, 13th and 14th Amendment, 13th Amendment, making slavery illegal, except that part where it says punishment for a crime, or except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, which is a whole other conversation about the prison pipeline. And the 14th Amendment, which sought to double down on making the rights of freed slaves, or making the rights of bringing freed slaves fully into the American fold as citizens. And then in the 15th Amendment, which gave those freed slaves, at least the men, the right to vote. The 19th Amendment would give women the right to vote in the next century. Yet 1963, right? So about 100 years later, socially the law was passed to give black men at least the right to vote in the law. But socially, as we know in the South, especially under Jim Crow and the Black Codes, which were basically laws created after the Union Army left the South after Reconstruction, basically undercut what was constitutional. And then we had the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which, along with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, sought to reassert the rights that were granted to freed slaves to Black Americans 100 years prior under the law. I saw this meme a few days ago, and I think it's just worth repeating here, because I think too privilege has been given. It's a charged word with equity or like social justice. And for me, when I say someone has privilege, at least in the equity sense, what it is like you have a full confidence that the systems of our country work for you. And institutional equity, I feel that's what people are protesting for, or at least what the civil rights movement was about, and Black Lives Matter, I believe, is one of the reasons it's about, is guaranteeing that we have equal justice and equal protection and from law enforcement, and then we can fully respect the systems that our country was intended through laws and wars and constitutional amendments to wrap around all of us as citizens. And then I like this analogy. This photo rather. I think this kind of definitely encapsulates how policy is made, definitely in the lobby, but in society, right? Not one person can make change. Change can be that rock, the boulder they're lifting, right? It takes a group of people to lift it up, pushing it, pulling it, and it doesn't show. There also will be people pushing down on the hill, trying to knock it back. And it's going to be, I think, in the history of our country has shown a continual back and forth. Progress being made, never as fast as most want, but nonetheless, progress being made. Moving to part two, it's the impact of policy at the local and state level. State and local governments enact laws and regulations that define how economic activity takes place. And these range from business and tax policies to environmental regulations, and definitely importantly, zoning rules. Additionally, policymakers decide how to allocate funding for services like public safety, transportation, and housing. And this is important, I think, because I know obviously DC, especially in this era, gets a lot of the headlines. But I think as some of you may know, especially if you're business owners, local government, especially ordinances and resolutions passed at city council, can have a dramatic impact on your business. And a lot of those things aren't really, they don't get that much press or play or known about, but can have definite impact on how collectively businesses are able to operate in Austin. This is on the local side of example. For those of you who may be familiar with this or not familiar with this, it's Austin's 1928 master plan. And this relates to zoning or a massive zoning overhaul that happened in the 20s. So in 1917, the U.S. Supreme Court found that, ironically, the city of Louisville's racial zoning ordinance was unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. Therefore, cities at the time that were interested in having their racial groups segregated had to find other ways to do it. One of the city of Austin, the city council at the time, commissioned a study to do a land use blueprint about how this could be done, and that was the 1928 master plan. What this did and what it recommended was that all of Austin's blacks, the black population of Austin, be moved to one area, a Negro district, to save money and to solve Austin's desire to segregate the races. This ended up being the area which is now District 1. It's everything, the east side. The plan was adopted March 22nd, 1928. And what the insidiousness of the plan, or what the plan also did, was it took control of property owned by blacks outside that district, land and homes, and made them available to developers, speculators for pennies in the dollar. And just as context, we're talking about areas like Wheatsville, Clarksville, areas that are in very high demand now as property, were places where Black Austinites lived up until the late 1920s. And for those who watch Council, or those who start watching Council, this comes up to this day, right? This has major, I think amongst everything else, this policy that was passed in the 20s has and will continue to be threaded into policy arguments that our city has. And I know our council has been, in the city, has been addressing institutional racism, but this is a major part of it that ripples to this day. And then tying in the state, what happens when state and local policies aren't aligned? And two examples I want to give are around police funding and then homelessness, which I think a lot of you are probably familiar with. It was last year. And this is our Texas Governor Greg Abbott and our Mayor Steve Adler. So last month, rather, it seems like it was a year ago. Last month, the Austin City Council approved a reduction of APD's budget, Austin Police Department's budget, by $150 million. Now, this wasn't a outright cut. It was a reallocation of resources, including personnel, which amounted to $150 million. Later that week, state leadership, so that's Texas Governor Abbott in the middle, to his right is House Texas House Speaker Dennis Bonnen, and to his left is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, all Republican, announced in a joint press conference that they would be supporting legislation that would seek to freeze the property tax revenues of any cities that cut their police budgets. What that actually meant, like what defined a cut, wasn't clear. But this was a statement they brought up soon after. And then with homelessness, which this was a year ago, our council passed in June 2019. They rescinded ordinances which activists said criminalized homelessness. So basically, camping in place, which I'm assuming some of y'all may have seen around underpasses now or downtown as well, or around the community. It was a very controversial thing, and that's actually still being talked about now and going into January in the Texas legislative session. In February, earlier this year, pre-COVID, Governor Abbott stated as much that they will be looking at this in the next legislative session, which happens in January of 2021. And how this comes about is preemption, right? So anytime, and these are just all the major metros in Texas, anytime that a city does something that runs counter to what the state may want, or at least certain members of a community may want, they can turn to the state and seek preemption, which is just the use of a state law to nullify an ordinance retroactively or proactively, what that city can do. It's controversial because I think the adage is that cities know how to best govern themselves as states do to the federal government. Depending what side of the coin you're on, people see that differently. And definitely, particularly with Austin, the state, the capital, under this current administration, last several administrations of Republican rule, love undoing things that our city does. And I didn't put it on here, but examples could include, most recent prominent example would be the Uber Lyft ordinance that our city passed several years ago that sought to make Uber and Lyft illegal under the current way they operated. The governor immediately came out, and that next session, they passed a bill that basically made the TNC, or overruled Austin's rules rather, and made TNC's, Uber and Lyft, and companies like that operationally legal, and counter to what Austin had proposed. So, for those, again, who don't know, our form of government, the state level, meets every odd year. So starting in January, it will be the 87th legislative session. And this is to break out of this. Right now, the House, state leadership is all Republican. The Senate is majority Republican, as is our House is majority Republican. Depending what happens in November, the Democrats gain 9 seats. They gain 9 seats and hold a slight majority. Preemption is off the table. So anything that comes out of the Senate to the House that affects a city goes down, which will have interesting repercussions in terms of local policy, because a lot of things, even with cities like Austin, we know they're very aware that the state's watching us, watching them and their policies, and they use those, whatever happens in Austin, they call it like Austin bashing. They use that for political campaigns, and also they love messing with the city. And so if the House flips just the side of blue, the threat of that goes off the table, which honestly opens up a whole range of possibilities that, at least from the business community standpoint, are maybe particularly onerous, as Austin tends to be run more progressive to some folks' liking. So part 3, why you cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. Our city's continued growth and prosperity is directly tied to the actions or inactions of our elected officials and the policies they support or oppose. Key issues that y'all need to be aware of are council elections that are happening in November. There are 5 seats coming up, as well as Project Connect, which is Proposition A. That's going to be a $7.1 billion transit bond, a multimodal bond, largest Austin's ever had. The closest one we had prior to that was for $750 million. And we'll talk about the land development code as well. So we're going to have five council seats up. And if for those who don't know their districts, I'll share information with Mel and Alyssa about how you can find what district you're in. But there are 5 seats up. You can only vote in your district. District 2, which is currently held by Mayor Pro Tem Delia Garza. She is the first Latina on City Council and was recently elected this summer to be our next county attorney. 4 candidates that raised fully open seat. And then District 4, 6, and 7 feature incumbents that have challengers. District 4 is Councilmember Greg Gassar. District 6, Councilmember Jimmy Flanagan. District 7, Councilmember Leslie Poole. And District 10, Councilmember Allison Alter, the most challengers. And then Project Connect, again, a $7.1 billion transit plan. Will be listed as Proposition A on the November ballot. You'll probably start seeing some. You probably have seen ads supporting it on Cap Metro's buses and then around different billboards. There is definitely opposition to this, and it comes down to various opinions or various views on how much property taxes will increase. The folks who are for Project Connect and proponents for it are stating it'll be a 4% roughly increase on your property taxes, while the opposing side is saying it'll be a 25% increase on your property taxes. So very divergent views. And again, I can share information with the team on where you can assess for yourself the information they're providing. And then the land development code, and this is something that it originally was on track to pass in the spring, or at least by early summer, and was derailed. But the land development code is the Bible for building anything in the city, residential or commercial. The last time it was revised was in 1983, which at that time Austin's population was around 373,000 people. Currently, we ended the new year at just under 1 million. I'm sure we're already past that now. We'll see in the next several months. But very different kinds of zoning and land use policies, you can imagine, with those populations. We've gotten bigger, larger and denser. Council has been trying to revise this since 2013. On the prior code, there was an attempt called Code Next. That was an 8-year process that went down in the summer of 2018. This the current iteration went down in a court ruling on appeal. So right now the clock's been restarted. But this issue is something that I can't predict when it will come up. But for all of you who have a long-term investment in Austin, want to buy a home here, start businesses here and such, it is something to definitely watch because it will come up before the end of this decade, hopefully before 2025. But this is probably one of the key things that will really define Austin's growth and affordability is how, what kind of homes can be built, where they can be built, what kind of, and also what kind of buildings can be built. And then on the engagement side, I mean, just being a part of the AYC, I know its mission. And I think that in itself is you're on the right track. But again, it's educating yourself on the issues. It's educating others in a thoughtful way, right? Not just a Facebook battle or Twitter battle, wherever it may be. It's donating time to candidates. It would have been block walking, but now it's virtual campaigning, hosting Zoom events, and also political giving as well. That's a very important part. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It can be $5, $10. It's just these, for those who don't know, campaigns cost money, even when they're virtual. And it's important if you really, if to the degree you can give, if you support a candidate, to fully support with your time and talent and treasure as well. And these are some suggestions I have for other avenues to engage the community, just to get more knowledgeable. The Atx Accelerator, it's relatively new. It's a few years old, but it's founded on a startup incubator model, but it's focused on getting folks who are interested in running for city council. It's programmatically getting you through a program that gets you ready to run if you so chose. But it's also good to know how the city operates. They provide a lot of mentors for former elected officials in the city, and also give you a good view of how everything nuts and bolts of the city work. You have City Works Academy, which is a city-run program. I did that several years ago. That you apply for it, and if you get in, they run, I think, about 6 weeks, and you go through you just go to visit different parts of different departments in the city, hear directly from city staff that tell you how they operate, and it's a good primer for those who are even new or have been here for a while, just how it all works as you start getting deeper into policy, if that's what you choose. And then definitely just joining a city board of commissions probably is jumping in the deep end on it. But there are dozens of boards and commissions available for people to join. You have to be nominated by a council member, which isn't a hard process. There's a site online through the city that walks you through it. But there are, depending on when terms expire, people drop off. Everything from planning commission, which zoning cases are brought before. I used to be on the transportation commission. Dozens: environmental, equity, Asian quality of life, Black quality of life, Hispanic quality of life. So definitely something to check out as well. And then another program is Leadership Austin's Emerge and Essential programs. This is something I would highly recommend. I did the Emerge program, and it's more community. It's more to get you plugged into just community and civic leaders or future leaders. But the folks who I went through the Emerge program with, and that was in 2012, are now, if they're not already leaders, are just about there in terms of the civic and community sector in the city, and also in the private sector community. So I would say in closing, though, our city won't be as great as the folks like yourselves who step up. We need your time, your talent, whatever manner you see fit to use them. But please do use them. Don't sit in the sidelines. Figure out where you want to get involved. It doesn't have to be everything. It can be one thing, but please do something. With that, I want to thank you for your time. And I think, Alyssa, if we have any time left, I'm happy to do any questions.
AJ, thank you. First, thank you to you for taking the time to be here today and sharing more information about policy and equity with us, and of course how we got here today and where we are as a city. I know that questions are coming through in the chat, so I think that we will have time for some. But first, just to kick us off, like you said, local policy covers so many topics and it moves at such a rapid pace. What is the one thing you recommend that we do to stay up to date with what's happening? And like you said, it's really good to focus in on maybe just one thing, but what's the one thing you recommend that someone can do to kind of stay up to date on what's happening?
Yeah, I would recommend getting a subscription to the Austin Monitor. And as disclosure, I'm on the board of that, but I use it. I mean, even before I was on the board, as a lobbyist, I subscribed to it. It is the only news source in town that is dedicated to covering City Hall, whether that's the council meetings and also the different boards and commissions. And particularly now, like in the pre-COVID, you could go sit in on a board meeting or a board and commission meeting and watch. They're all closed off now, and a lot of them aren't streamed live when they meet. And so the reporters of the Austin Monitor are one of the best. I mean, I read that every morning at 5 in the morning every day, right? I'll put it that way. I'm a contract lobbyist. I read that. It's definitely a quality source to use for comprehensive, focused City Hall coverage.
I agree with you. I subscribe to their daily update, and you just get it every morning, and it's great. Even reading the headlines, it's really helpful to stay up to date on those quick reads.
I would also recommend the Austin Business Journal.
Perfect. So we have a couple questions that came in. So let me ask this first one. It says, how can we bring our friends and families along for our own civic engagement journey? How can we have maybe that tough conversation about policy and equity? Mm-hmm.
I think, and that's, it depends on the person you're talking to, right? But I think some people, unfortunately, are they open to having a conversation, or is it going to be a wall up, right? And you have to assess that. I think coming from a place of, look, like Alyssa, I'm not attacking you. I don't even want to have a debate. I just want to tell you about why I believe the things I believe in, and give you perspective, if they're open to that, right, on where I'm coming from, and then I want to hear where you're coming from, right? And start with that. Like, don't get immediately, your person, how could you vote for that person? Is the wrong way to start the conversation, right? But you have to be a gauge, especially the era we're in. Some folks are not going to be open to conversations, and you can I think test the waters and start with conversations and see how that goes. But never, don't come from a place of trying to attack someone.
Thank you for that, AJ.
Oh, real quick too,
Next
and the venue. Probably don't do it the holidays, especially this year. Find just a random day, but don't do it. I wouldn't recommend doing it at family gatherings or anything. Maybe be on a walk or something nice, and do it that way. Yeah, no family gatherings or holidays, please.
Good point. Good point. And those are around the corner, so that's a good tip. Okay, we have this next question. Can you speak very briefly to how the 1928 master plan evolved into the 60s and present day?
Yeah, I think you can look at it like a ripple, right? You throw a pebble in a lake and just the ripples that flow from it. When you basically had a massive land, well, you had a land grab one from families who had to move, who had homes and owned their properties and had to go to were forced to move to the east side if they wanted any kind of programs, right? And this still ties into, this is, it ties into the separate but equal fights that happened in the 60s. Just because, there were communities over there were schools over there, but it was a forced move. There were families already over there, but I think when, and for those, I forget, I don't know how many folks here are new to Austin, but the east side up until, I came here in 91, my family came here in 91. Let's say it became rediscovered probably in the early 2000s, right? It was not the place to be, right? It wasn't cool. It was the place. It was just known as it was sketchy, right? The east side. It was, all the blacks and Hispanics live in that part of town, and it wasn't good. And I remember, it's those things have ripples now because those families who might have owned their houses there after they were moved over there, all of a sudden now you're having a lot of you're having a lot of gentrification happening over there. So those folks who had stability are now being pushed out. So it has ripples, or a domino effect to this day because of that, right? A lot of those families, were getting removed over there, didn't want to be over there. They had homes, made lives themselves, and that's been disrupted to this present. One thing too, if I could add to that, I didn't include it in the slide, but tying into all this around in this time in the 70s, up until we had a new form of government, the district system, in the 70s to 2014, Austin had in place what was called the Gentleman's Agreement. So you had one guaranteed black seat on council and one guaranteed Hispanic seat of the 7 members of council, right? And that stood right over 3 decades. And that was an official thing, but that was just something that was everyone knew about it. That was going up until, again, 6 years ago. And that was a factor, of just institutional racial policies, such as the 1928 master plan that, again, factor to this day.
On that, AJ, can you speak just for a second about the current district setup and how it works? Yeah,
we have 10 council districts and then the mayor. So this council, the voters of Austin amended our city charter in 2012. In 2014, we had the first round of 10-1 elections, including mayor. Each district has roughly, at the time, was drawn to have roughly 50,000 people in them. There's it's basically more or less a clock, right? You start with 1, 2, 3, all the way up to North Austin. The mayor is elected citywide, but everyone else is elected by their district. The goal being to allow council to be more representative of the people. Again, the prior council was all at large. And in theory, they represented the whole city, but by and large, most of them lived in West Austin or central West Austin, Clarksville, Tarrytown, Hyde Park, and the like. So it wasn't as representative of the city.
And I encourage attendees, we have that resource list, so we could definitely drop in there the district map, and you can see now where the lines are drawn for the 10 districts.
Mm-hmm.
AJ, next question. Can you talk more about your experience on the City of Austin board, time requirements, what it was like, and what you learned being there?
Yeah, it was a fun experience, and it was cut short when I got a new job. That basically, if you're a lobbyist, you can't. If you are a lobbyist, you can't serve on a board or commission. Just conflicts of interest potentially. But the time on it depends on the board. So my board met once a month at City Hall, and every board or commission is staffed by a city personnel, right? So they'll prepare your agenda backups from meetings, everything else. You of course have to read out, make sure you're prepared for it. And it depends on the board. boards like the planning commission, board of adjustments, zoning and plating, anything around land use, which is a lot of the policy battles happen at City Hall, are going to be very time consuming. Planning commission, for example, I mean, they can come in at 6 on a Monday. They meet every Monday. They can start at 6 and run until midnight or past that. And these are unpaid, right? So a lot of folks who give their time from this do it because they love to, they want to give their time, right? There's no money in this, and it's quasi-governmental because, especially planning commission, there are folks who are trying to get something built, is getting denied, and they're getting yelled at, the commissioners and everything else, right? So it depends on the board, but I had a great experience on it. You definitely learn more about city government, the processes. It's you're a sworn city commission or a city commissioner, so you get a city email, and you can have the potential to vote and pass things that have an effect on council.
And how do you go about joining a board or commission? Just a quick little, where would you go as the first step if you were looking to get engaged?
Yeah, the city has a site, and I'll share it with you. I'll share it with you, Alyssa. The city has a site. You go on there. First step is to see what whose term is coming up. Pull back. The first step is to know what district you're in. You don't have to be necessarily appointed by your council member of your district to a seat, but it helps. So it's looking to see what all the boards and commissions, what they do when they meet, and then looking at what spots are open or coming up for open or maybe open, and then submitting a letter with your desire to serve to that respective council member whose seat or whose appointment is open.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question. Are there any podcasts you recommend listening to in regards to local, county, state, and federal policies? I feel like this is a perfect.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I have my own podcast called the BG Podcast. So, I mean, it's my podcast, my firm is focused on, conversations at the intersection of community, business, and politics. I've been trying to mix up more some business leaders, but I work to bring in folks who can speak to just issues of the day as contemporaneous as possible. So definitely, subscribe to mine. I'll send it to you, Alyssa, just share that with your folks.
We'll add it to the resource list.
Yeah, and then the Austin Monitor also has a podcast as well, and then KUT, the local NPR affiliate, are good resources as well.
Perfect. Thank you. We have 2 minutes left, so let's see if we can get through these last 2 questions. If we aren't from Austin, where can we go to learn more about some of the history you mentioned?
There are resources on the City of Austin site. That's where I pulled information from the 1928 Master Plan. And again, I'll have to add that. That's good. I can add that to my list of things to share with the resource. But they're available, and it's just, I mean, again, it's just nowhere to look. But I can pull that for y'all.
Thanks, AJ. Last question. Was the gentleman's agreement a mandatory minimum of 1 Black and 1 Hispanic person on council, or only one of each and no others allowed on it? And did it end in 2014? Yeah, it was. I mean, I only knew about it in 2014. It was just why it was told by the folks who've been around the block on this. It was just known. There was only going to be 1 Black person and 1 Hispanic person, and that was it. And you saw the difference because when we had 10-1, that first body or group of folks came in on our current system, it went from that to having 3 Hispanic members of council. Right. And thank you. Mm-hmm. Thanks, AJ. We're out of time, so I'm gonna wrap it up so we can get everyone to their next sessions. Again, right. AJ, on behalf of the Young Chamber and our attendees, thank you for taking time to join us today. This is certainly an important topic and one that requires continuous learning and engagement by all of us as things move so rapidly at both the local and state level. So thank you for being here. And to our attendees, it is time for our breakout sessions. Today, you have the choice between what is affordable and how do we ensure it stays that way, and education to workforce, the pipeline of development. You can easily navigate to both sessions right here in Remo at the links below after we end our presentation broadcast. You'll see the buttons. If you can't see them, just click and drag the background of your screen until you can. You click and drag up. And then you can click the session of your choice and you'll be redirected to your new Remo virtual room and be ready for the presentation. Thanks again for joining us for Civics 201, and we'll see you in the breakout rooms at 5:30. Thank you.
All right.